All right, good evening. I'm getting some yeses on our back end that we are ready to go. So before we have a lot to talk information to cover tonight and some great conversations to be had. So I'll just jump in and get started. Good evening. My name is Madeline Adams, and I am the CEO of Japan America Society of Tennessee, or JAST as we familiarly call it here. Thank you to those of you who have joined us today and who may be viewing this afterwards on video. But we are discussing today Japanese arts and culture in the classroom, how Tennessee students are discovering Japan. I'm personally excited about this topic, having done the reverse. I taught English in Japanese classrooms as a JET teacher and culture once upon a time. Being in Tennessee, it is exciting to know that there are some incredibly dedicated educators and organizations who support them, who are promoting Japanese language and culture education. This is our second of three in the Mitsui Lecture Series of 2022 to 23. If you missed it, our first program was a sake tasting and information session at Rice Vice by Proper Sake, learning about the brewing of sake from owner Byron Stitham. We are working on our third in the series, which will be presented in March, so keep your eyes peeled. The Mitsui Lecture Series is made possible by the generous support of the Mitsui U.S.A. Foundation. JAST will present 3 virtual symposiums, or in person this year, highlighting Japan's footprint around the world and its contributions to Tennessee's prosperity over the last 40 years. The Mitsui Lecture Series goals are to present lectures on topics of interest to the Japanese and non-Japanese speaking business communities in Tennessee, and to deepen the understanding of contemporary Japan and Tennessee to create a greater sense of community and exchange. Before we jump into tonight's panel, I'd like to introduce our youth ambassador, a new pilot program started this year. Tara Haggerty, who is a sophomore here in Nashville, lived in Japan and attended middle school from 2017 to 2019, while her father, Senator Bill Haggerty, served as a U.S. ambassador to Japan. Tara is independently studying Japanese culture and history, and with education as the topic tonight, Tara, would you like to say a few words about your experience in Japan and how you're continuing to keep Japan and Japanese language and culture on your radar here in Tennessee?
Good evening, I'm Tara Haggerty, and I'm working with Madeline Adams to help bring a teen perspective to the Japan America Society. And so as a student who has gone to school both in Japan and in Tennessee, I'm looking for ways to include studying Japan here to keep up my interests as well as spark others. Currently, I am working on an exhibition that displays the similarities and differences between education here in the US and in Japan, whether it is similar in different sports, the school lunches, the school celebrations, and even the different graduation clothing. Japan and the US both have differences in school along with their similarities. I'm hoping to present this at different events, public libraries, and schools to help teach American students a little more about Japan, specifically through education. I'm also currently participating in the SPICE program, which is a program through Stanford that teaches American students who are already interested in Japan more about the history, literature, culture, and art, and specifically US-Japan relations. Because a lot of my classmates don't know much about Japanese culture, I'm trying to find more ways to help expand my knowledge as well as expose them to Japan. I'm so grateful to be here tonight so that I can share my experience with you and so we can all learn more about this topic from each other. If anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them at the end.
Tara, thank you so much. I'm sure you'll have some great comments on how we can continue education or champion Japanese education in the American classroom. And now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce our moderator for the evening, Margaret Price. Margaret, who is currently marketing and podcast launch management for NPR, will tell you more about herself and her connection to Japan and education, and will kick off and introduce our panelists tonight. So with that, Margaret, thank you so much.
Thanks, Madeline, and thank you, Tara, as well. I really appreciate the intro to this meeting. So hello all, and welcome again to the Mitsui Lecture Series, Japanese Arts and Culture in the Classroom, How Tennessee Students Are Discovering Japan. My name is Margaret Price, and I'll be your moderator for tonight. Full disclosure, I am a native Memphian, and I spent the first 10 years of my career working in different parts of Japan, first with JET as an English instructor, but then in tourism and marketing. Now I'd like to introduce you to our panel and then allow them to tell you a little bit more about their areas of expertise. But I do want to let you all know that I will be checking questions in the chat to follow up with in our question and answer section at the end of tonight's discussion. I hope you have a couple of good questions for our panelists. Join me in welcoming Kyoko Hammond, lecturer of Japanese at the University of Tennessee Martin, Katie Jones, K-12 art instructor in Memphis Shelby County, David Meredith, a Japanese ELL instructor and world language lead at Antioch High, Micah Yamoka, in the Japan Outreach Initiative Coordinator with the University of Memphis and Memphis Botanic Gardens. Kyoko, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself and what you do?
Sure. Hello, everybody. So I'm Kyoko Hammond. I'm a Japanese native. Due to my father's job, my family moved frequently, but I mainly grown up in Tokyo, Japan. And I joined UT Martin in 2005, and I teach Japanese language courses. And in recent years, I also teach Japanese culture course. Thank you for the photo in English, and UTM offers a minor in Japanese. So this is some photos from my Japanese culture class, and also, when we host a Japan Day at our local public library. And at the end, I would like to add, I serve on the Tennessee event committee. I worked for Tennessee area speech contest and now organize the video skit poster presentation contest with 4 other instructors in Tennessee, Japanese instructors in Tennessee. And I would like to take this opportunity to express our sincere appreciation to our generous sponsor, Mitsui U.S.A., which has supported, us, our event from the outset. So thank you very much. And I'm very excited to be here today.
Thank you so much, Kyoko. Katie, can I hear a bit about you, please?
Hey everyone, I'm Katie Jones. I am actually a Memphis-born educator. My background is actually in art education and the fine arts. So most of my career has been spent doing art. I've actually never taken a language course outside of maybe French for 2 years in high school because it's all that was offered to me. Most of my education came through learning about anime and then doing it art-wise, and then going into doing more art with things for Memphis College of Art, learning through painters and stuff like that from Japan, and then integrating it into my master's thesis. Most of my career is spent teaching. I also work for Mid-South Science Fiction and Fantasy Convention as their social media director. I also am part of this fine arts community in Memphis. I have a lot of hats. I do a lot of things.
Thanks so much, Katie. David, you're up next.
Sorry, hi, I'm Dr. David Meredith. I'm originally from Knoxville. Currently, I teach Japanese and English language learning at Antioch High School in Metro Nashville Public Schools. I'm originally from Knoxville, and like several other people on the panel, I've spent, altogether, well, I spent 3 years on JET, and then I spent another 5 years on top of that working in Japan as a private English teacher at different English language schools at several kindergartens and several private high schools. This is our first year offering Japanese at Antioch High School, and so far it's been, I think, a pretty successful endeavor. We have just under 100 students that are currently enrolled, and we're looking to expand it. We're going to be offering Japanese 1 and 2 next year, and then hopefully we'll be able to expand beyond that in the future.
Thanks, David. And finally, we have Micah.
Yes. Good evening, everyone. My name is Micah Yamaoka. I am a Japan Outreach Initiative Coordinator at University of Memphis and Memphis Botanic Garden. Japan Outreach Initiative, JOI in short, is one of the programs hosted by Japan Foundation. It sends coordinators like me to Mid-South and mountainous area, aiming to promote grassroots activity between the US and Japan. I am originally from Tokyo, Japan. I moved to Memphis in the summer of 2021. Since then, I have been involved in many kinds of outreach activities such as school visit, libraries program, Japanese culture events on campus, and the botanic garden, and participating Japan-related festival and events. And then, yes, thank you for sharing the pictures. Those are my pictures from my programs.
Brilliant. Thank you all so much. So I think top of mind for everyone is, how did you get here? What's important to you to teach and share when it comes to Japanese culture and language? And I'll open that all up to all of our panelists. Kyoko-san,
All
why
right,
don't I
well,
start with you?
I'll jump in if nobody else is going to do it.
Thank you.
Of course, it's a language course. I'm teaching Japanese 1. We're using the Genki 1 textbook in class. It's the same textbook they use at MTSU and some other universities that offer Japanese. We're just going through it at a slower pace. I'd say that probably more so than when I went through Japanese in college, there's a strong culture focus, especially pop culture. Students are already really excited about anime. I've got a number of students who are into J-pop, and those types of pop culture asides help stimulate the interest that's necessary to persist in the nuts and bolts of language study. Because I mean, Japanese is not the easiest language to learn, particularly when you're coming from a Western language background where you're not familiar with the writing system, where kanji is hard. And I think that by having a pop culture and a traditional culture focus, try to emphasize what's cool about Japan, that helps keep the interest high for the stuff that maybe is a little bit more arduous.
I think that's a great segue into what you do, Katie. Can you tell us a little bit more about your process with K through 12?
Most of my work that I do with K through 12 stuff, actually it started out me learning cultural is through Giles Prochies. If he hears me, he's gonna get mad. I butcher his last name all the time. He wrote a book, What's Japanese in Japanese Animation, that came out a good 20 years ago, that my friend randomly gave to me in 8th grade, I think it was, and I still have it. And it was like make me realize this is more than what there is in anime, and it showed me what was a part of Japanese anime, and it made me more aware of the culture. So when I go to do that with my students, I make them aware, this comes from this country, it's made by these people, it has these very intricate, very Japanese things to them. Especially with K through 12 kids, they get confused often about the differences in different cultures and different shows and stuff. So a lot of my time is dissecting all that and showing them the difference, usually.
Thank you so much. So we've heard from high school and K through 12. Kyoko, I think I'd like to hear a little bit more about what it's like in the university setting.
Sure. So, the teaching language is, just like, David Sensei is doing, it's similar. But before, I think we are focusing on, really teaching the language and appropriateness, go with the language, how to greet, what kind of gesture, why you say this. But I think recently, we focus on kind of like the culture part a lot. And it's just one thing, I also challenge the students, what it means to know that, the culture. And so learning the Japanese culture also means, or language, learning their own culture and language, and so have that kind of more like that they have to be kind of challenged to resist, their temptation to act on impulse, and you just kind of like, that's strange, that's weird, why do you do that? Or just kind of hold on and then just kind of think about it and then ask why, way they encounter something, different. And so that's something I really try in language class and culture class, both nowadays.
I I think that's really perfect for an education setting. And I think that there are less opportunities day to day in the real world. But Micah, I know a lot of your work is addressing those same sort of cultural instances. Can you tell us a little bit about what you do?
Yes, I do. So I'm not like a school teacher, so my setting is really different. So I go to the library. Sometimes the program is just one time program, but so mostly my program is like introduction to Japan. So I usually start with like introducing Japan, a country or culture itself, and I try to pick up some topics that is familiar with their everyday life. For example, I can start with Pikachu or video games, Nintendo Switch, and then following the question like, what kind of dogs do you have? Okay, Japan has this kind of dog, the breed, and how many seasons do you have? Or I sometimes show my picture of my family, so they can find something in common. So I try to show attitude like I would like to know about you, so please know about me, and then let's find something in common. So that's how I approach to my audience, especially for the young children.
That's amazing. I want to touch on something that I think all of you mentioned just now and kind of segue into the next question. You mentioned that you used cultural and cultural interests in order to like further your education. So I really want to know, like, what has teaching Japanese language and Japanese culture meant to you and your students? And I'd love to hear specific examples if you have any. I know David in particular has some interesting stories about how he's implementing education.
Yeah. Now this is again the first year that we've offered Japanese at Antioch High School, but I would say that our school is an atypical environment for a Japanese program. First of all, let me say there are only 4 high school Japanese programs in the state of Tennessee: Clarksville High School, Clarksville High School, Mount Juliet High School, and White Station High School in Memphis. Our school is a Title I school. We have we're very low socioeconomic level on average among the students. We're majority minority. Our plurality of the school is Hispanic, mostly from Central America, especially Nicaragua, Honduras, and Guatemala. We have the highest number of, like as a percentage of school population, we have the highest number of English language learners of any high school in the state. So having said that, let's see, a number of students at our school are not necessarily naturally academically inclined. And so, I think that by offering unique programs to students who usually wouldn't have access, it really helps expand their. I don't want to sound cheesy, but just expand their horizons. Expand their idea of exactly what might be possible. The world is a much bigger place than the Antioch area of Nashville, and also we're divided into an academy system. So students after their freshman year, they choose an academy to go into, and they can specialize in teaching and social work. They can specialize in business and banking. We also have an automotive and electronics and robotics program. And I'm a member of the Academy of Marketing and Design that also has a culinary arts program and focuses, kind of directs kids into the hospitality industry once they graduate. A lot of our students will either be going to technical school or they will be going to work when they graduate. And a lot of them are very aware that there are a number of prestigious Japanese companies here in Middle Tennessee. And the hope is that by developing an understanding of the language and culture, that might, give them a little bit of a boost when they apply for jobs at places like Nissan or Denso or Calsonic or any of the other numerous Japanese companies that are here in Middle Tennessee.
Thank you so much. Kyoko, how are your university students making use of Japanese culture classes in particular?
It's I think that's something, I mentioned it, I just want them, to know what's out there. And, I was actually teaching Japanese in Southern California before. And so when I was there, in a way, I didn't have to do anything. It was just all over them. And, sometimes students come back after weekend and they say, yeah, I just went to the concert, such and such concert. I'm like, what did you do? And they were like, yeah, I just went to Japan and then went to the concert. I'm like, what? But that was the kind of, it was common, in Southern California, like LAX to Tokyo was just kind of, they can go even on the weekends. And then came to, Martin, which is, so Japan and Japanese language culture is still foreign for many of the students at UT Martin, or like Martin is, rural, town, but at the same time, I meet students who are interested in Japanese language and culture, every semester. I feel I'm just very fortunate, to meet those students. And so, but I guess it's my challenge. So we are kind of away, from the major cities, even in Tennessee, like, 3 hours from Nashville, 2.5 hours from Memphis. And so I would like to, make the more connection, between the students and, for example, like the business, community. Right now, I would like to go out and then, have some kind of open discussion with the, let's say, like business community. And I can explain, what we are trying to do at the, college level and what the maybe business community is seeking, and make that kind of connection more. And so I can actually truly make that what students are learning at college, Japanese language and culture, to be a kind of real addition, for their future, maybe personal goal or career goal.
That sounds amazing, Kyoko. I look forward to seeing what you do next. Katie, Micah, what are you doing to teach younger children about Japan?
Well, today, exactly. I have this one lesson I do with a lot of kids. It's teaching them artist interpretation versus author's intent. I use Studio Ghibli a lot of times because it's like, oh, you guys like anime? Let's show you a different kind of anime. Because a lot of times, like, Studio Ghibli films are really, really accessible for everybody right now because of them being on HBO Max, especially the application and on the TV and stuff now. And I was explaining to him, like, oh, Hayao Miyazaki, he's from Japan. And do you guys can you guys guess where Japan is? And like, can you think of things that maybe from Japan? Now explaining like kind of like food things, because a lot of kids, like little kids especially, are kind of like food motivated. And I was saying like, oh, like, those noodles you eat, do you know what they're called? They're called ramen. And it's like, they're from Japan. And then we're talking about, Pocky. And it's like, and a lot of kids know that now, especially since Pocky is so widely available in the US. Instead of like 20 years ago, it's like you had to go to the international markets to find them. And explaining that to them, and it kind of like segued into it. And they're like, oh, this is interesting because he's from the place that we find this food, because little kids, like I said, are food motivated. So that was a great segue into it. And the lesson basically goes into like describing one of the characters, either one of the books he pulled from or one that's connected to one of the movies in another way that he wrote. And I go through and I describe the character and stuff. So it's kind of like a weird segue for literacy intervention, also teaching them about illustration and writing and how they come together.
Yeah, so like everyone already talked about it, but I think teaching culture, I mostly teach cultures. It's kind of giving them motivation to learn about Japanese language. And I remember when I visited one of the public school offering Japanese language in in Memphis, and I was a little bit nervous going there because it was a kind of rough area. But I remember I visited there when I entered a classroom, their eyes was like shining. They were like, wow, Japanese was real. And that was a really impressive moment. And I guess for them, it was difficult to imagine the situation, the future using Japanese in the real life. But, and I guess, also that was a kind of, they had to take a classes as a required subject, one of the required subjects. So, but I hope, from my program, they felt like closer to Japanese people or Japanese culture. Yeah, before, compared with before. So, yeah, that was a really good, reaction that I received.
It's amazing. Well, I think you all touched on sort of the cultural cachet of Japan and what your students get out of learning about Japanese culture, but it's 2023 and I have to ask, Kyoko, David, your students have access to impressive translation software and smart technology. Why are they interested in learning Japanese language when they can use their phones for translations? What are they learning about in your class?
Okay, I go first. So it's, it is amazing. It is amazing. And so I don't know if you have heard the Chat GPT. Have you ever heard that? It's, I tried and I was quite amazed. And so, they reached a point, those like the computer technology, can do more than just simply, translating, but so that's why I actually now ask students, just why, why you learn Japanese in classroom, why not, just use the translation software. And so I have no intention to deny the importance of technology. It's fast, convenient, and it's available. But I try to make my students aware that they are not just simply, changing language A to language B. They are not, they are doing more than just mere transactional, work. And of course, they get frustrated, when they cannot express themselves in Japanese, something they can do so easily in English. I know that feeling because I feel it all the time. I can do it much better in Japanese, but I have to do it in English, but at the same time, once they also experience the unique, sense of kind of accomplishment when they were able to do it. And so, so as an educator, I try to kind of like make them, I think, what's the difference between just using a translation tool and actually you can do it. And also like, you just changing the word, that's all you need to do. When you talk in Japanese, that's all I need to do. For example, today, can I just bring in my translation and then I just speak Japanese and let the computer talk in English? Is it the same? So kind of like, instead of like, I try to say, I just kind of give them kind of think, what kind of actually like joy they can actually feel and use that technology for their learning tool, and so usually students, at the beginning, they were like, huh? But then they start thinking, oh, okay, I think we are doing much more than just changing words, changing from A to B. So that's my approach. And I think students are aware of that difference too.
Yeah, you're really emphasizing the human part of language education. David, what about you?
Yeah, related to that, one thing I try to emphasize to my students is it's like Kyoko said, it's not just this transactional one-for-one exchange between language A and language B, word one and word B. Having spoken both English and Japanese for a while now, I studied like I started studying Japanese at East Tennessee State University when I was a freshman in college in 1995. So I've been studying Japanese for coming up on 30 years. And one thing that I notice is that when I speak Japanese, my Japanese personality is not exactly the same as my English personality. It's like, oh, moshi moshi, yoroshiku onegai shimasu. I mean, I bow when I talk to people on the phone. when I speak Japanese. I don't do that when I speak English. But the way that you connect to people in their own language is a different level of connection than just some translation software. And translation software is still not perfect. It's a lot better than it was, but you lose nuance, you lose kind of like the heart of talking with other people, because there are ways of expressing things natively, whether it's in English or in Japanese, that don't exactly translate. And so I emphasize to my students that one reason that you really want to learn to speak Japanese, if one of your goals is to really connect with Japanese people, or to go to Japan, make Japanese friends online, or whatever it is you're going to have a much closer connection if you can kind of meet them where they're coming from, whether it's Japanese kids. I spent a long time teaching Japanese kids how to speak English, whether it's Japanese kids talking to native English speakers in English, or American kids speaking to native Japanese speakers in Japanese. It just provides an extra level of connection that's really cool. And then, of course, the reason they want to learn Japanese is so that they can watch their anime in Japanese and understand what's going on. But whatever helps them get through their homework and turn and learn it.
I mean, very fluid transition from homework to sort of art expression. Katie, can you tell us a little bit about the work you do with children, their behavioral, emotional literacy issues, and how you address them with Japanese culture like anime?
Well, in Memphis, especially, Memphis has a very low literacy rate, because I work with Mid-South Con, and most of our work deals with donating money towards their literacy campaign for Mid-South Literacy every year through our convention. Working with that as a teacher and bringing in anime is that it kind of connects them to realize, like, oh, this stuff is written by something else, and then we start reading that, and so we can understand the translation differences of what this says versus this, especially when you go from like light novel to manga to the anime, so you can see different interpretations of how it's done artistically, that like with a lot of things, actually with things that are with books and stuff. But because a lot of our kids during the pandemic had access to Netflix, Crunchyroll, and Funimation, they were all watching that, especially my kindergartners. It's surprised now that I have kindergartners who are like know about anime and stuff, and I'm like, who raised you? And also, can I adopt you? Half the time. But a lot of times it's like these kids are really into it and they want to know more about it. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to use this as my segue to help you guys learn about literacy. So much, because like I said, Memphis has a low literacy rate. Like most of our people who are incarcerated here in Memphis have educational issues, especially literacy, and just like being suspended from school and the prison to pipeline thing that we have here. And we're trying to stop it. So we're bringing in things in ways that's going to connect them better and get them interested in school. Also, with our community being mostly a African-American population, it kind of like gives them another piece of community that they might have lost and they might not feel like they have. Because I've noticed that a lot within our communities here in Memphis, it's like this was like a way of connecting with a community that you did not have, especially with anime and stuff, because that connects a lot of people in Memphis. It's a small pool, small pond, but it's big enough to where everybody started come together for it.
That's amazing. I really admire the work that you're doing for us here in Memphis. Micah, can you tell me a little bit more about what you're doing to make sure that the programs and work that you've been building here in Tennessee continue on once you go back to Japan?
Yeah, so the JOE is a program sending a coordinator like me for only 2 years. So after 2 years, we have to leave the host site. So the challenge for JOE was sustainability. And the first thing I did to address to this issue was to add my programs to existing programs in the community. For example, I established Japanese after-school Japanese clubs at the school, campus schools. The University of Memphis has elementary school, middle school, high school, and the kindergartens under the university. And I just started new clubs for the elementary, middle school, and high school. So it's kind of like a base environment. It's just a environment, but I think since it's a part of the school's program, it is more likely to be offered continuously after I leave. And also I also have student interns from the University of Memphis working at the club with me. So I hope they will be able to keep it running after I leave Memphis. And yeah, that's the thing I'm trying to do. I hope like the students at my club, after they graduate, will continue studying Japanese at the University of Memphis or UT Martin or in Nashville, and become the educators like in the Japanese language or any related subject. Then they will come back to the schools as an intern or teacher to lead the clubs or the classes. And this loop will like circulate and repeat itself successfully. Yeah, that's my plan. I hope it will happen.
I believe in it. That sounds like a great plan. That really transitions into this open panel question that I'd like to ask all of you. Where do you think the future of Japanese culture / Japanese language education in the States is headed?
Okay, I'll go first. So yeah, so from time to time I hear the good news, that yes, the number of, for example, like high schools in Tennessee, where they can learn Japanese is limited, but just like David Sensei said, new program, it's just added. That's a great news, and congratulations to David Sensei, and I'm just very excited. And so for example, so I would love to include high school students for future Tennessee, those contest events, things like that. But at the same time, I'm at the college, and I am also aware that some people may not understand the value of learning foreign language or foreign, the culture. Humanity in general, sometimes, focuses on a lot of science, technology, and humanity is kind of on that kind of secondary. And so, so I have, but as I said, I have just students who are interested in, and unfortunately, because of sometimes the college setup, students may not be able to pursue all that Japanese language classes, maybe because of the financial aid, because of they have to graduate in, so many hours in so many years. And so, but they are very interested in Japanese language and culture. So, one of my goal is to really send out the more Japanese enthusiasts. It's a hard word for me to pronounce, but, out there in the society. And I myself, as a Japanese, college educator, instructor, to again, go out classroom, campus, and then, meet the outside world. And again, make that new connection. And kind of, I feel like there are still kind of gap in, what we try to do at college, and then, what maybe the outside world is looking for. So I would like to learn that, and then, help out the students, and, help out all that kind of like the Japanese, culture, language, all the education, in Tennessee.
I'm kind of hoping.
Go ahead. You go ahead.
I was going to say, I was kind of hoping that with the integration of more interest in Japanese, especially on the elementary and middle school level, that we can push in more into even introducing more languages back into the classroom. It was 2011 when our system cut out most of our language course, all of our language courses practically on the elementary level and on most of the middle school level. I live within a block of the two schools, the international schools, and my kid went to the international elementary school. And they used to offer all like tons of languages, middle school and high school. And they had Japanese too. One of my best friends took it in middle school, and it was available in high school too for him. I hope that we get more push into schools again, and we have more funding for it. Because it's really like we really need that education and stuff back into the schools for kids can pick up stuff, so we'd be a little bit more culturally aware of things, because only certain schools really have that international background to them, or try to push in different cultures, especially in Memphis, because it seems like it's kind of an afterthought sometimes, and that if we can get one in, we can get more in.
David?
Yeah, I think on the one hand, the future could be very bright for Japanese education in Tennessee. You've got a lot of interest. Again, Japanese pop culture is everywhere. Whether it's J-pop or anime, or the snacks in the international aisle at Walmart, or whatever it is. Kids are really excited to learn about Japan and experience Japan. I think in terms of especially education at the secondary level, you have this vicious cycle that kind of prevents as much expansion as could be possible. So one of the big reasons I think that there are so few high school Japanese programs is it is very difficult to find a place where you can get certified to teach Japanese in the state of Tennessee. Now, I went through the University of Memphis when I was at East Tennessee State University. And if you know anything about the state of Tennessee, it's like a slanted, polygon, and
It's a
East Tennessee State
parallelogram.
is in one extreme east corner, and Memphis is down in the other extreme west corner. And that was the only place where I could get certification, and that was only because I'd gone through training in Japan at the Japan Intercultural Academy of Municipalities in Otsushi, and taken some Japanese pedagogy classes there. And then on the high school side, I think one reason why more colleges, even that have Japanese programs and have Japanese majors, because you've got Japanese majors at the University of Memphis, you've got Japanese majors at I think the University of Tennessee, you have world language majors with a concentration in Japanese at Middle Tennessee State and East Tennessee State, and then there's a number of schools that offer minors. So even though you have a number of colleges in the state that offer programs, one of the reasons that they're not offering more teaching credentials is because there aren't very many high schools that offer Japanese. And the reason that there aren't many high schools that offer Japanese is because principals know that they can't find teachers. And so you've got this vicious cycle that kind of feeds into each other, where the shortage of Japanese teachers leads to the lack of Japanese programs, which leads to universities not offering the credentials. And I think that if it was easier to get people credentialed to teach Japanese, you would see more Japanese programs. Because another concern that principals have is if you're going to start a program like Japanese and you've got someone who can teach it, they don't want to start a brand new program, especially in a graduation requirement course like world language is, where you have to have 2 years of the same language to satisfy the graduation requirement. They don't want to start a program and have a teacher in there that leaves and then they can't replace them. And then those kids are in a lot of trouble because they can't get that second year of language that they need. And so I think that there are some structural barriers to the expansion of Japanese language education in Tennessee, and that's something that we should really address in a methodical fashion, maybe through something like P16 councils. I've been a part of those in the past, like back when I was a graduate student, I helped with some of those. But some kind of communication among, interested, I'd say the business community, because the business community has a lot of pull, especially the Japanese business community, colleges and universities that offer the credentials necessary to teach Japanese, and then public schools and even private schools too that might like to offer Japanese but are worried that they can't they can't create a sustainable program because they don't necessarily have this, or they're not necessarily going to have the pool of potential staff that they need.
Thank you so much for that very thorough answer. Micah, I want to kind of dovetail that question. I want you to answer it, but I also want to kind of hear about what's next for you and your future work. So that'll be, what do you think about the future of Japanese education here in Tennessee? And what's up next for Micah?
Yeah, so since I have worked as a coordinator 1.5 years, so there are not so many things that I can talk about the future. But I think as other teachers already have said, like a translation skills may decrease in importance, but I don't think the importance of cross-cultural education or diversity education will disappear. And knowing about other culture and then developing sympathy and empathy take place. So I think that is the role we educators in the Japanese language culture can play. And a lot of cultures, such as Japanese food, anime, have been introduced to the U.S. But other panelists already said, there are still a lot of differences in terms of language and culture, custom behind it. So there are more things that we can learn and develop to understand. So I'd like to continue to teach them and then give students to be able to gain ability of empathy, sympathy, or deep understanding to a Japanese culture. And also I want to just, I want to give them an opportunity to have fun together with people from different cultures.
I love that answer. And I love all of your answers. Thank you for such thoughtful answers to all of the questions I've prepared. Now we can open it up to some of the really great questions that we have from the audience. I'll let, if they're not addressed to anyone in particular, I'll let anyone who would like to take it. But our first question is, Konbanwa, I live in Knoxville, Tennessee. I recently started independently studying Japanese with the goal of becoming fluent and taking my son to visit Japan one day. I would like to know if Japan America Society is active anywhere in East Tennessee. It would be great if there were individuals or some sort of Japanese culture center I could tap into in advance for my exposure to Japanese culture and eventually speak with others in Japanese regularly as well. So this person's interested in cultural connections in East Tennessee, or if there are any specific clubs that Japan America Society or another group might have available for them.
Well, I'm sorry. So just like, David's sunset story. So, ETSU, East Tennessee State University, has a really good, Japanese program. And also the teacher, Tezuka Sensei, is a very good, teacher in person. So I would suggest, contact, Tezuka Sensei. And then, maybe she can probably help out, where, her son can have the Japanese culture experience and, things like that. What do you think, David-san?
Yeah, I think East Tennessee State's a really great place to check into. University of Tennessee offers a world language major with a concentration in Japanese, and there is a substantial Japanese community in Knoxville, because my daughter, when we first came back from Japan, she went to the Higashi Tennessee Hoshuko at Maryville College, and it's a school that's mostly for Japanese expats, like their kids, so these executives come from Japan to work for 3 to 5 years in middle management in the U.S. for a subsidiary of Japanese company, and they don't want their kids to fall behind on the curriculum while they're here. So they send their kids to these Hoshukos, these Japanese specialty schools, where they focus on the Japanese curriculum on Saturday. So they go to school all day Saturday, and they have Japanese history and kokugo and sugaku and rika and all the classes that they're supposed to have to get ready for high school entrance exams and college entrance exams. But that's also a very close-knit Japanese community. So I think that if you were to contact the Japanese school at Maryville College, they could probably put you in contact with members of the local Knoxville area Japanese community.
And I'll dive in here. Marquez, thank you so much for your question. It looks like you're asking questions for yourself on learning Japanese, which is fabulous. So you can take your son. Learning language is a great way for that multi-generational learning opportunity with the both of you. You're doing it already by jumping into conversations like this that JAST is hosting. And so we are primarily located here in Middle Tennessee. However, and supporting West Tennessee, most of our educators are in the Memphis area, but we are also serving East Tennessee. So that is something that our goal is to reach more, to hold more events in person, online, really highlighting and celebrating East Tennessee. The suggestions brought up are fabulous suggestions, reaching out. There are some incredible online services as well. UT Knoxville, their Tennessee Language Center has online classes as well. So there are lots of opportunities that Tennesseans support. A lot of the Saturday schools that David is talking about are primarily for the Japanese learners that may go back to Japan to study, or Japanese families. However, I know that the one here in Middle Tennessee does actually host Japanese lessons for non-Japanese natives. So really, you're asking the right questions. Shoot us an email and we'll try to write this down for you. But stay on our mailing list because we will definitely keep these going. I know that they will see you if you are present. The Knox Asian Festival is a great way also to tap into Asian culture, but I know Japanese culture is highly supported at the festival as well. So you're doing it already, and so we can definitely help point you in some of those other directions. But thank you for asking that question, absolutely, and thank you, David and Kyoko.
Brilliant, thank you, Madeline. I have a question for Kyoko. Can you talk more about how studying Japanese might help your students in Martin find jobs and develop their careers?
Could you say it again?
We have a question. Please talk more about how studying Japanese in particular might help your students in Martin find jobs or develop their careers.
How? The question is how.
Correct.
Yeah.
Or in what way?
Right. It's I think that's also the challenge I'm facing too. But again, for example, like the UT Martin, like I shouldn't say my program, but UT Martin offers just a minor. And so I always tell the students, what is your passion? And then if your passion is Japanese, wants to become a Japanese teacher, Japanese literature professor, that's kind of Japanese specialist path, or there are not, no, I'm not that, but I love Japanese. Then I would say, okay, so what would you like to do for your future, and how would you like to use Japanese for your career? And so it's really like how you would look at what you're doing with the language. For example, I have those Japanese 111 student this semester. They just learning those Japanese aiueo kakiku keko right now. And so I told them, yeah, maybe you are not continuing taking Japanese after this semester, but, kind of think about when you go for example, job interview, you can say, I am not scared of new or different things. I will enjoy those challenges. For example, I took Japanese language and, I learned how to do it. And now I understand the challenges to learn, new language or like new things, but So it is kind of like, so you set that, the major interest. And then, if you would like to add Japanese on top of that. And so, so if that's, that, because to be honest, Japanese is a very hard language. And so, if the students would like to use the language at the business level, it is hard work to reach that proficiency. But, it is not just that. And so understanding the culture, just like, Micah, mentioned, knowing that having empathy, understanding the people from other culture, that's also very, very important, so it's again, it is my challenge too. And so I would like to see that actually more, for example, fellowship or internship possibility, for the students. And so maybe they don't have that high, command of the language, but they have their specialty with their major. And then, go and, experience that, but also that Japanese, kind of like language, kind of knowledge, cultural background also help to just kind of jump in to a new, setup. And then, but they can, actually manage, those like challenging situations in a positive way.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. I'm actually going to combine two questions that kind of dovetail nicely into each other. This question was initially asked of David and Katie, but I'd like to also open it up a bit to Micah and Kyoko if you're interested. David and Katie, what is it about anime that appeals to and interests high school students and younger children in particular? And then a follow-up question from Jai in chat is, she is a high school student that's been interested in learning Japanese, but is looking for the most efficient way to use her time since she's really busy studying in high school. So 2 questions.
Well, part of it is, especially with kids, it's a lot of the kids a lot of kids get introduced to it, especially now because millennials that's got introduced to it a lot. Can kind of thank and blame Cartoon Network with Toonami in the afternoons. They had shows like Robotech, which is actually Macross, combined 3 different series together from Harmony Gold, and Sailor Moon, shows like that, and they kind of got introduced that way to a lot of millennials. I had started watching it in the 80s thanks to my brothers, and got a little bit traumatized by a few of them, but it was that was how it was introduced to us as millennials. And then like we had our own kids, and so when our kids went on COVID break, they watched everything with us, and they got to watch it. They got to introduce their shows like Dragon Ball and all that. And it appealed to them because it's like, oh, my parents like it, so like cool, like I want to get into it too. And that's when I start like introducing other things, like they have that base knowledge of like this is this and it looks like this because of these elements in it, and then expanding like, oh, this has actually got more cultural elements to it than they realize. Because that book I had was Japanese and Japanese animation that I had from 20 years ago, was kind of groundbreaking and letting you know that, oh, this is more than what you think it is.
I think that's all that's true. I certainly, shared my interest in anime with my kids. When I was coming through, Akira was brand new, and it was like, have you seen this thing? It's so crazy, man. And I think part of it is that the way that we view anime traditionally in the West is not the same as the way they view animation traditionally in the East, particularly Japan. And that is, in the West, we've traditionally viewed animation as goofy stuff for kids. And in the East, especially with Japanese animation, it's viewed much more as just one more medium of storytelling. And so I think that you get a lot more adult type stories in anime than you would get with traditional American animation, like Looney Tunes or Mickey Mouse, or even like Disney princess type stuff. And I think that the more adult stories with the more adult themes appeals to particularly older students. I don't know, I'm not sure how well versed on particular anime you are, but if you watch something like Tokyo Godfathers, that is not a kid's movie. That is a very thoughtful social commentary on homelessness in particularly the Tokyo area. And I think that just the fact that anime addresses maybe a broader range of subject matter and more adult themes and more adult stories is appealing to kids, or especially older kids, because they don't get the same thing with American animation, at least until not recently. You have some more adult themed animated shows now, like South Park and Rick and Morty and things like that now. But and until really The Simpsons and South Park, animation was considered kid stuff.
I have to disagree a little bit because we had shows in like the early 90s, like the Chris Claremont version of like X-Men that came out, and then Gargoyles because of Greg Weisman. But actually I kind of admit that's how I got past some animes I probably shouldn't have watched at such a young age, by my mother from Blockbuster, because it's like, oh, it's anime, it's animated, mom. The 18+ sticker just means that they don't have a rating on it. Like then I'm watching like Grave with the Fireflies at age 11. Like that was smart. Or Devil Hunter Yoko, or other ones that you really should not be watching at as a preteen.
There's a lot of culture to be exposed to, especially when it comes to, cross-cultural media. I want to go back to Jai's question about the most effective way to study, but we also have a question from Lauren in chat, and I think we should maybe start to wrap it up, but I really want to address this one. For Kyoko and David, what has been the most effective way to combine language learning and culture in your purview? For example, she loves to cook and has been making more Japanese dishes lately. She does her best to say each ingredient and step in Japanese while cooking and using it practically. Have you found doing this to be effective in learning both languages and understanding more of the culture? What else would you suggest?
Whichever you enjoy. Cooking is great, if you enjoy cooking, and usually people enjoy food, so it's a really good way to kind of just have fun, and at the same time you can show like kind of table manners, and something is okay in Japan but maybe not so okay in United States. Music, some students love to listen to music, and then they try to understand certain phrase and ask me like, why this one saying kimi, for you, what's the difference? And then I also have to kind of think about, okay, let's think about this, so whatever they find fun, and then there is always some kind of culture actually attached to it. And so also just like David Sensei mentioned have that kind of real connection. So means make friends, like make friends, and meet the Japanese people and have fun together. I think that's the best way, and it's also best way to learn the culture, something similar and something different.
It's been pretty well proven in research and that language is only really meaningful in context. You only really learn language when you have a need and you're using it for an authentic purpose. So whatever you can do that is legitimately communicative is going to be the most effective in terms of learning language. I remember there was a guy I lived in Yamagata in Tohoku, northern Japan, for most of my time, and there was a guy up there named Daniel Carr, and he was famous on nationally in Japan because he learned Yamagata dialect. And he was a jet way back in the 80s at the beginning of the program when there weren't very many. But he said that what he would do is he was walking around his apartment in Japan. Every time he did anything, he vocalized what it was he was doing. I am walking across the Genkan. I am going to the kitchen. I am picking up the spoon. I am stirring my oatmeal in the bowl. I am getting rice out of the rice cooker. And he did this consistently. So I think that's the other thing, is whatever you do, be consistent about it. Probably the least effective thing that you can do is sit down with 5,000 flashcards and try to memorize big, long lists of words. Whatever it is that you do when you're trying to learn Japanese, as much as you can, make sure that it's authentically communicative. And part of that, I think, is, trying to develop relationships either with people like like me who lived in Japan for a while and speak it fairly well, or with native speakers who live in the community and spending time with them, just doing things that are fun, but also trying to use Japanese at the same time that you do it.
Micah, I think this speaks a lot to what you've been doing here in Tennessee. Do you have any kind of tactile ways that we can learn Japanese?
Oh, any like opportunities or
Yeah,
learning?
or so we're looking at cooking, we're looking at iterating things. You do them.
Yeah, well, like look, yeah, there are many resources, but looking back my English learning experience, I use YouTube a lot. I watch thousands of videos of YouTube, like an English speaking YouTuber, or I don't know, I sang songs, English songs a lot, along with karaoke videos. And then I found that some of the university students in Memphis already started watching like Japanese TV show through YouTube, and then they sometimes ask about a question, and I think that's the real conversation, like a real life conversation. So maybe, yeah, you can start Google about a YouTuber in Japan, or yeah, you can find any TV shows in Japan on YouTube and try to imitate or look up some phrases and vocabularies. I think that's the most like natural, and the latest, you can get the latest trends too. So yeah, that's my suggestion.
I love that suggestion, and full disclosure, that's how I have learned Japanese. I love YouTubers and like day of life things, and I also like learning songs because you learn some interesting Japanese through lyrics. That's awesome.
I would just add, I'm sorry, I would just add also give yourself some grace. You're not going to be perfect, at least not for a while. Give yourself permission to make silly mistakes. Give yourself permission to struggle with it a little bit. It's going to take a while before you build up your vocabulary and your grammar and your just your general knowledge to a place where you can come close to expressing yourself the same way in your second language that you do in your first language. So I guess use it as much as you can. Uh, you know, be open to making mistakes because that's how you learn, and be patient because it'll take time.
I think that is a brilliant end to this conversation. And I want to thank you all again for all of your very thoughtful answers. I know there were a couple of questions that we were unable to get to. I encourage you to reach out to JAST and we can get you those answers appropriately. I also want to say thank you all for attending. And of course, a special note of gratitude to the Mitsui U.S.A. Foundation. I'd also like to point everyone to the program survey linked in the chat. We would really appreciate if you filled it out. And I think that we are at an end. Thank you all for attending today. I really appreciate it.